Afraid Orca is stuck and cries for help. You won't believe what happens next. A young female orca was left abandoned one morning in July 2015 near the shore of British Columbia, the last location you would anticipate seeing an orca. This innocent orca clearly made a mistake, and when the tide went out, she was stuck on jagged rocks in agony and misery, unable to escape by swimming. When the rescuers arrived, a remarkable thing occurred. Continue watching the video to know more. Thousands of whales, dolphins, and porpoises were captured in rocky coastal shorelines and beaches every year while they are on a quest for food and are just caught off guard when the tide rolls out. It is quite incredible what a bunch of volunteers just accomplished in Hartley Bay, British Columbia. The team cared for a trapped orca for 8 straight hours until the tide could liberate her. The last place an orca should be is on dry land. Yet that is exactly what Eric Keane discovered when he went to look into some weird noises he had heard while sailing the waters of British Columbia early one July morning in 2015. When Eric, a whale researcher, heard somber cries coming from a little protrusion of rough stone on the shore of Andrew Rocks, he was doing a study on the region's fin whales on his boat, the Bangarang. According to Rescue Our Oceans, a baby orca was in obvious distress, jammed between sharp rocks that were rising out of the water. Around 7:30 a.m., Janny Ray and Herman Mute. Because of Eric's description, the orca experts at the nearby environmental group Whale Point were able to determine what must have happened. Several orca pods would work together to hunt seals for food in that location, with some orcas chasing the seals onto the coast while others patiently waited to spring the trap. Fortunately, Eric happened to be sailing close by. Eric was well known to Janny and Herman as they frequently collaborated with him on their research. They were traveling back from Hartley Bay towards the coast when the young female orca must have miscalculated her position. As the tide went out, she found herself in shallower and shallower water until there was no way to extricate herself from where she lay wedged between the rocks. The baby orcas were in a desperate condition, and Janny and Herman realized they would need all the assistance they could receive. As they sped north to join Eric in the Squally Channel, they also made contact with Gitkus Gardens at Hartley Bay and Fisheries and Oceans Canada (DFO). In the meantime, Eric and his team approached the orca to see if they could assist her in getting off the rocks. They didn't approach her too closely at first to prevent surprising her and perhaps causing her to damage herself while attempting to flee. When Janny and Herman arrived, she was bleeding slightly from her pectoral area and her tail. Eric later learned that DFO representatives John Ford and Paul Cottrell had instructed him to keep the polka cool and wet until the tide rose. If they attempted to lift her off the rocks or pull her, they would have seriously injured her because the rocks were covered in barnacles that could have cut her skin. When Janny and Herman arrived, Eric discovered that DFO representatives John Ford and Paul Cottrell had instructed him through satellite phone to keep the polka cool and damped until the tide rose once more, at which point she would be able to free herself. A young killer whale being trapped, uncomfortable, and surrounded by humans must have been pretty frightening for her. Her breathing was quick and shallow, and gravity was obviously making it harder for her. The tide would not rise again for another 8 hours, and so the marathon rescue began. When they first approached her, the orca was obviously concerned about what their intentions might be. Eric cleverly constructed a temporary water pump out of a hose and some duct tape and traveled to the island's rear, where he operated the pump for Herman, who used the hose to cool the orca with seawater. As they worked, the rescuers gently positioned wet sheets along the length of the orca's body. The rescuers observed that the orca's cries had subsided and that she was breathing more steadily. It appeared that humans had gained the orca's trust because they were the ones consoling her, while her own family could only remain in the nearby waters and call to her. The orca calf's dorsal fin was getting dry, so the rescuers used a pillowcase from Eric's boat to wet with seawater and cover it all morning. Fortunately, the weather had been gray and overcast, but as the sun rose to its zenith at noon, The cloud cover dispersed and the heat of the day began. The rescuers took turns pumping seawater over the young orca and replacing the sheets covering her with freshly seed-dipped, more astonishing sheets. Everyone in earnest worked incredibly hard to keep the orca cool and wet. Working in shifts, they meticulously cared for the orca as if she had a fever, changing out her dry, warm coverings for cooler, wetter ones, constantly and dousing her in seawater from the pump to ensure that she would not dry out from the heat of the sun. If Eric hadn't heard the young female orca's cries until this point, the rescuers couldn't help but imagine how horrible things may have been for her. The rescuers had not covered the orca's head because they did not want her to become frightened when her sight was suddenly taken away, because she might feel even more helpless. But the sun's ferocious rays made it absolutely necessary to shield her delicate skin from the heat and dryness. Until the tide came back more than 8 hours later, it was routinely bathed with water from a hose connected to a tank and covered in thin blankets to protect its fragile skin from the sun. On social media, volunteers claimed that as they were attempting to help the orca, it kept sobbing. The orca was eventually lifted off the rocks by the increasing water, and it swam away to rejoin its pond. Sadly, multiple endings might occur in stories that are similar. A young whale that became stranded on the shore of Bolshoi Kamen, Russia, wasn't as fortunate. Locals decided not to assist the stranded baby when they learned it had washed the shore. Instead, they ate it after cutting it up. When it was stranded, the newborn whale was still alive. The social internet has been flooded with videos of a bunch of men breaking into the animal. In one image, a man is seen standing on it, and throughout the film, the group and camcorder can be heard laughing. Have people lost the ability to intervene on behalf of animals in need in a world where it unfortunately happens that they are abused or neglected? Why ought we care? Despite decades of human effort to conserve them, 6 of the 13 great whale species are now considered to be endangered. Whales are an important part of the marine environment and are at the top of the food chain. Additionally, there are restrictions on the sale of whale products internationally and a prohibition on commercial whaling. There are still others who hunt whales for sport or for personal gain. Nevertheless, in fact, a number of international wildlife organizations will instruct locals in these regions on how to rescue these endangered species by teaching them how to prevent strandings. With this, we conclude our video. We appreciate you helping us keep it going by watching. The best way to support our channel is to watch another episode. Thank you for tuning in. To ensure that you never miss an episode, please subscribe to our channel and check out our other videos. See you next time.